The smell of burning wood mixed with gunpowder filled the air on that cold April morning in 1945. Franz wiped his flour-covered hands on his apron and listened to the distant rumble of American tanks. At 52 years old, he had seen enough war to know when it was over. The German army was collapsing like a house of cards, and everyone knew it. "They are coming," Klaus whispered from the kitchen window. The young man was only 19, barely old enough to grow a proper beard. His hands shook as he held onto the window frame. Outside, American soldiers moved through the trees like shadows. Otto stood at the stove, still stirring a pot of watery soup. He had been a chef in Berlin before the war, cooking fancy meals for rich people. Now he cooked tasteless food for a dying army. "Put down your spoons, boys," he said quietly. "This kitchen is closed." The three cooks had been stationed at this small outpost near the Elbe River for 6 months. Their job was simple: feed the officers and soldiers stationed here. But there were not many soldiers left anymore. Most had run away or been killed. The Americans were crossing the Elbe River now, and nothing could stop them. Franz remembered how different things had been in 1939 when the war started. Back then, German forces had swept through Poland in just weeks. Everyone thought the war would be quick and glorious. Hitler promised them a 1,000-year empire. 6 years later, Berlin was in ruins and Russian soldiers were raising their flag over the Reichstag building. The dream had become a nightmare. The door burst open. American soldiers rushed in with rifles pointed. "Hands up! Hand hoch!" they shouted. Franz, Klaus, and Otto raised their hands slowly. They were just cooks, not fighters. They had no weapons except kitchen knives that a tall American officer walked in behind the soldiers. He wore captain's bars on his uniform and had tired eyes that had seen too much death. His name tag read Morrison. He looked around the kitchen, then at the three Germans standing with their hands up. "You speak English?" Morrison asked. "A little," Otto replied. He had learned some English before the war when he worked in a hotel that served foreign guests. Morrison nodded. "You three are prisoners of war now. You understand." They understood. The war was over for them. Franz felt relieved more than afraid. At least he would not die in some pointless last stand. Klaus looked like he might cry, but he held it together. Otto just nodded calmly. But then something strange happened. Morrison's soldiers brought news of a discovery nearby. They had found a hidden compound in the woods, about half a mile away. Inside were women. Over 40 German women who had been kept there as comfort women for Nazi officers. Franz felt sick when he heard this. He knew such places existed, though he had tried not to think about it. The Nazi Party had done many terrible things during the war. This was one of the worst. "We need to see this place," Morrison said to his men. Then he looked at the three cooks. "You three are coming with us." They walked through the forest under armed guard. The morning sun filtered through the pine trees, making long shadows on the ground. Birds sang as if there was no war at all. When they reached the compound, Franz wished he had never seen it. The building looked like an old hunting lodge, but inside it was a prison. The women sat on thin mattresses, staring at nothing. Their faces were hollow, their bodies thin. Some were very young, maybe 18 or 20. Others were older. All of them looked broken. An American medic was already checking them. "Sir, these women are severely malnourished," he reported to Morrison. "They need proper food and medical care immediately." Morrison walked slowly through the room, his face growing darker with anger. One woman flinched when he came near, as if expecting to be hit. He stopped and stepped back, giving her space. Franz saw something change in the captain's eyes then. Something personal. Back outside, Morrison gathered his men and the three German cooks. "Here is what is going to happen," he said. His voice was hard as steel. "You three cooks are not going to a regular POW camp. Not yet. You're going to stay here and use those cooking skills to feed these women back to health. You're going to prepare good food, proper meals, until they gain weight and strength. You understand me?" Franz could not believe what he was hearing. "But sir, we are prisoners. We are the enemy." "Why would you? I do not care what you think you are," Morrison interrupted. "My sister was found in a place like this in the Philippines. Japanese officers had kept her and other women prisoner for 2 years. When American forces freed them, they were half dead from starvation. A group of captured Japanese cooks fed them back to health. Those cooks saved my sister's life. So now you three are going to do the same thing. Consider it payment for what your army did. Klaus spoke up nervously. What if we refuse? Morrison looked at him coldly. Then you go to the POW camp and take your chances with the other prisoners. I hear Russian prisoners are not too friendly with Germans these days. Your choice. It was not really a choice at all. Otto was the first to nod. We will do it, he said. Then he looked at Franz and Klaus. We will cook for them. Franz thought about everything Germany had done during this war. The camps, the executions, the cruelty. Maybe this was a chance to do something good, even if it was too late to matter. He nodded slowly. Klaus was the last to agree. Yes, sir. We will cook. Morrison seemed satisfied. Good. My men will guard you and bring supplies. You cook 3 meals a day. Real food, not that watery garbage you were making before. And you treat these women with respect, or you will answer to me. Clear, clear, they said together. As Morrison walked away to organize his men, Franz looked back at the compound. Inside were women who had suffered because of his country's evil. He was just a cook, just a small man in a big, terrible war. But maybe, just maybe, he could help fix one small piece of what had been broken. The sun was higher now, and there was work to do. Otto stood in the makeshift kitchen, staring at the supplies the Americans had brought. Real flour, not the sawdust mix they had been using. Fresh potatoes, canned meat, dried milk, even some vegetables. It was more food than he had seen in months. The Americans had resources that Germany could only dream of now. Where do we even start? Klaus asked, overwhelmed by the task ahead. Franz opened a bag of potatoes and dumped them into a basin of water. We start by making something they can actually eat, he said. These women have been starving. Their stomachs cannot handle heavy food right away. We need to start simple. The first meal they prepared was a thin vegetable broth with small pieces of soft bread. Nothing fancy, just warm and easy to digest. Otto carried the first pot to the compound building, escorted by 2 American soldiers. His hands trembled slightly as he walked. Inside, the women sat in small groups or alone. When Otto entered with the pot, they barely looked up. A German-speaking American nurse named Sarah was there, trying to organize things. She had kind eyes, but looked exhausted. Ladies, these men have prepared food for you, Sarah announced in German. Please, you need to eat. Nobody moved. The women stared at the floor or the walls, anywhere but at Otto and the food. One woman started crying softly. Another turned her back completely. They do not trust us, Otto whispered to Sarah. They think we are like the others. Sarah nodded sadly. Can you blame them? They were prisoners of German officers. You are German. They are terrified. Otto felt shame burn in his chest. He set the pot down gently and stepped back. We will leave the food here. Maybe they will eat when we are gone. Back in the kitchen, the 3 cooks sat in silence. Their first attempt had failed. The food they worked hard to make sat untouched in that room. This is pointless, Klaus muttered. They will never accept food from us. But Franz shook his head. Would you trust your enemy to feed you? After everything that happened to them? We must be patient. That night, Otto could not sleep. He kept thinking about his grandmother, who had raised him in Berlin. She always said that food was love made visible. When he was sad as a boy, she made him potato soup. Simple, warm, filling. It always made him feel safe. The next morning, Otto had an idea. He gathered ingredients and started cooking something different. Not the tasteless military rations. Not even the thin broth they had made yesterday. He made his grandmother's potato soup. Real potatoes, a little butter that he saved from the rations, some herbs he found growing wild near the compound. He cooked it slowly, carefully, the way his grandmother had taught him. The smell filled the kitchen. Klaus and Franz looked at each other, surprised. It smelled like home, like peace, like a world before the war. What are you making? Franz asked. Something my grandmother used to make. Otto replied, stirring the pot gently. Something that speaks to the heart, not just the stomach. When the soup was ready, Otto did something different this time. He did not bring the whole pot. Instead, he filled just one bowl. He walked to the compound alone, without armed guards. Sarah had agreed to let him try this his way. Inside, The women watched him suspiciously. Otto held the single bowl of soup and looked around. His eyes fell on a young woman sitting alone by the window. She looked barely 20 years old. Her hollow face reminded him of his own daughter, who he had not seen in 2 years. Otto walked slowly toward her, making no sudden movements. He knelt down a few feet away and set the bowl on the floor. Then he backed away. "My grandmother made this soup," he said quietly in German. "When I was young and the world felt scary, this soup made me feel safe. I hope it could do the same for you." The young woman looked at the bowl, then at Otto. Her eyes were full of fear and suspicion. But there was something else too. Hunger. Deep, terrible hunger that had been gnawing at her for who knows how long. Otto stood up slowly and walked toward the door. He did not look back. He did not push. He just left the bowl there and walked away. An hour later, Sarah came running to the kitchen. "She ate it," she said, almost shouting. The girl by the window, "She ate the whole bowl." Otto felt tears spring to his eyes. It was just one bowl of soup. Just one woman out of 40. But it was a start. Over the next 2 weeks, things slowly changed. The young woman, whose name was Greta, ate every meal Otto brought. Then another woman joined her. Then 2 more. They did not speak to the cooks, but they ate the food. Slowly, carefully, as if testing whether it was safe, Franz started baking bread. Real bread with a golden crust that crackled when you broke it. The smell of fresh bread filled the compound each morning. It was a smell of normal life, of home, of safety. Some women cried when they smelled it. Klaus discovered that one of the women, a thin woman in her 30s named Ingrid, was from his hometown of Hanover. "I know your mother," Ingrid said one day, shocking Klaus. "She used to buy vegetables from my father's shop before the war." Klaus sat down heavily on a chair. This woman knew his mother. She was not just a stranger or a victim. She was a real person with a real life that connected to his own life. The war had torn their world apart, but these tiny threads still connected them. Is my mother still alive?" Klaus asked, afraid of the answer. "I do not know," Ingrid said honestly. "I have not been home in 3 years. But she was alive when I last saw her. She was a strong woman." After that conversation, Klaus worked even harder. He made sure every meal was perfect. He saved extra portions for Ingrid, making sure she got enough to regain her strength. The women began to gain weight. Their faces filled out. Some started to smile just a little. They began helping Sarah with small tasks around the compound. And slowly, very slowly, they started to see the 3 cooks not as enemies, but as something else. Maybe not friends yet, but not enemies either. It was a small victory in a world full of defeats. But sometimes small victories are the ones that matter most. 1 month had passed since the 3 German cooks began their unusual duty. The war in Europe officially ended on May 8th, 1945, when Germany surrendered unconditionally to the Allied forces. Hitler was dead, having killed himself in his bunker in Berlin. The 1,000-year empire had lasted just 12 years. The news spread through the camp like wildfire, but the celebrations were quiet and subdued. Too many people had lost too much in the compound. Things were different now. The women had gained weight and strength. Their faces no longer looked like skulls covered with skin. Some had even started to laugh occasionally, though the laughter was always careful, as if they were afraid it might be taken away. One morning, Greta appeared at the kitchen door. The young woman who had been the first to eat Otto's soup now stood there with her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "May I help?" she asked quietly. Otto looked up from the dough he was kneading. He exchanged glances with Franz and Klaus. None of them had expected this. "You want to help us cook?" Otto asked gently. Greta nodded. "I used to help my mother in our bakery before." She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. "I need to do something useful. I need to feel like a person again." Otto smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "We would be honored to have your help." Within a week, 3 more women had joined them in the kitchen. There was Ingrid, who Klaus knew from his hometown. There was Anna, a quiet woman in her 40s who barely spoke but worked steadily. And there was Margaret, who had been a cook in a restaurant in Munich before the war, took everything from her. The kitchen became a place of healing. As they chopped vegetables and stirred pots, the women began to talk. Small stories at first. Memories of life before the war. A favorite recipe. A sister's wedding. A child's first birthday. These tiny pieces of normal life slowly rebuilt what had been broken inside them. Klaus was preparing vegetables one afternoon when a letter arrived for him. An American soldier brought it to the kitchen. Klaus opened it with shaking hands, then sank onto a stool, his face pale. "What is it?" Franz asked with concern. "My home in Hanover," Klaus whispered. "It was hit by British bombers in January. The entire street is gone. My family's house, my father's shop, everything." His voice cracked. "They do not know if my mother survived. She is missing." The British Royal Air Force and American bombers had destroyed many German cities during the war. Hamburg, Dresden, Berlin, Cologne, all had been bombed heavily. The Allies called it strategic bombing, meant to destroy Germany's ability to make war, but also destroyed homes and killed civilians. Klaus's mother was just one of hundreds of thousands affected. Ingrid put down her knife and walked over to Klaus. Without a word, she put her hand on his shoulder. "Your mother was a survivor," she said firmly. "If anyone made it through, she did. I remember how she kept that shop running even during the worst times. She was strong." Klaus looked up at her, tears running down his face. "I should have been there to protect her." "You were conscripted into the army," Ingrid said. "You had no choice. None of us had choices. The war took our choices away." That evening, the kitchen was quieter than usual. Everyone worked with heavy hearts, thinking about all that had been lost. But the next morning brought trouble of a different kind. American soldiers brought a new prisoner to the area, a German officer who had been captured trying to flee to Austria. He was Colonel Schneider, a former SS officer. The SS, or Schutzstaffel, had been Hitler's elite guard and was responsible for many of the worst crimes of the war, including running the concentration camps where millions of Jews and other people were murdered. When Schneider was marched past the compound, he saw the women through the window. His face twisted with recognition and something cruel. "I see they kept the merchandise," he said loudly in German with a nasty laugh. "Is the brothel still open for business?" The women inside heard him. Greta dropped the bowl she was holding. Anna started shaking. Margaret made a sound like a wounded animal. Franz was outside, gathering firewood when he heard this. Something inside him snapped. All his life, he had followed orders, kept his head down, tried to survive. He had told himself that he was just a cook, just a small man who could not change anything. But not anymore. Franz dropped the firewood and walked straight to where the American guards held Schneider. "You will not speak to those women," Franz said, his voice shaking with anger. "You have no right." Schneider looked at Franz with contempt. "Who are you to tell me anything, old man? You are a prisoner too." "I am a cook," Franz said, standing straighter. "I cook food to heal people." "What did you do?" "You broke them. You are nothing but a coward who hurt women who could not fight back." An American soldier moved to pull Franz away, but Captain Morrison appeared. He had been nearby and heard everything. Morrison held up his hand to stop the guard. "Let him speak," Morrison said quietly. Franz looked at Schneider with all the disgust he felt. "The war is over. Germany lost, and men like you are the reason why. You thought you were superior to everyone else. You thought you could do whatever you wanted. But look at us now. We are all prisoners. The only difference is that I am trying to do something good with what is left of my life." "What are you doing?" Schneider lunged forward, but the American guards held him back. Morrison nodded to his men. "Take him away. Far from here." As they dragged Schneider away, Morrison looked at Franz with something like respect. "That took courage," he said. Franz shook his head. "No, sir. It should not take courage to defend the defenseless. It should be normal. But we forgot that. Germany forgot that. And now we are all paying the price." Inside the compound, the women had watched everything through the window. That night, when the cooks brought dinner, Greta did something unexpected. She hugged Otto, then Franz, then Klaus. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for being different." It was the first time any of them had been hugged in a very long time. June 1945 brought new challenges that nobody wanted to face. The world was learning the full truth about what Nazi Germany had done during the war. Newsreels showed the concentration camps that Allied forces had liberated. Places like Auschwitz, Dachau, and Bergen-Belsen have been death factories where millions of Jews, Roma, political prisoners, and others were murdered. The images shocked the world. Even Germans who claimed they did not know were confronted with evidence they could not deny. American intelligence officers arrived at the compound with a specific mission. They needed to document what had happened here for the upcoming war crimes trials. The Nuremberg trials were being planned, where Nazi leaders would be prosecuted for crimes against humanity. Every piece of evidence mattered. That a stern-looking officer named Major Williams gathered everyone in the compound's main room. "Ladies," he said through Sarah, the translator, "I know this is difficult, but we need you to tell us your stories. We need detailed accounts of what happened here, who ran this place, and who visited. This information will help bring war criminals to justice." The room fell silent. The women looked at each other with fear in their eyes. Some started crying immediately. Anna, the quiet woman who worked in the kitchen, stood up and walked out without a word. "They are not ready," Sarah said to Major Williams. "These women have just started to heal. This will break them again." Williams looked uncomfortable but determined. "I understand, but justice cannot wait. The men who did this need to be held accountable." Otto, who was delivering the morning meal, spoke up. "Perhaps they could talk one at a time? In private? Not all together like this." Williams considered this and nodded. "That is acceptable." Over the next week, each woman was interviewed individually. The cooks could hear crying from the interview room. They heard doors slam. They heard women screaming in their sleep that night. The wounds that had just begun to heal were being torn open again. Anna refused to be interviewed at all. She locked herself in a small storage room and would not come out. Greta tried talking to her through the door, but Anna just cried and cried. Finally, Otto sat down outside the door. He did not try to convince her to come out. He just started talking. "When I was a young chef in Berlin," he said quietly, "I worked in a famous restaurant. Rich people came there, including Nazi officers. I cooked for them. I smiled and served them. I took their money." He paused. "I told myself I was just doing my job, just cooking food. But I knew who they were. I knew what they were doing. And I did nothing." Inside the room, the crying stopped. Anna was listening. "I cannot change what I did," Otto continued. "I cannot go back and be brave when I was a coward. But I can try to be better now. I can try to help you, even if it is too late to truly matter. And maybe, if you can be brave enough to tell your story, some good can come from all this pain. Maybe other men will be stopped. Maybe other women will be saved." The door opened slowly. Anna's face was red and swollen from crying. "What if I cannot find the words?" she whispered. "Then I will sit with you while you try," Otto said. "You will not be alone." Anna agreed to be interviewed, but only if Otto sat with her. Major Williams allowed it. What they heard that day changed Otto forever. Anna described things so terrible that Otto had nightmares about them for years afterward. But he stayed in that room and held her hand while she spoke. Later that week, Otto made a discovery that made everything worse. While cleaning out a storage building, he found a locked cabinet. American soldiers broke it open and found files. Detailed records kept by the compound's former commandant, a man named Colonel Vogel. The records listed dates, names of visiting officers, and notes about the women. They were written in cold, bureaucratic language that made the horror even worse. The women were not treated as human beings, but as property to be managed. Franz was called to help translate some of the documents since his reading skills were better than the others. As he read the names of German officers who had visited, his hands began to shake. He recognized some of the names. Men from his own former unit. Men he had served with. Men he had eaten meals with. "Did you know about this place?" Major Williams asked Franz directly. Franz closed his eyes. "I heard rumors. Whispers in the barracks. But I did not want to know. I told myself it was not my business. I was just a cook." He opened his eyes and looked at Williams. "I was a coward, sir. Ich chose comfort over truth." Klaus found photographs in another file. Pictures of the officers posing with each other at the compound, smiling like they were on vacation. In one photo, he saw a man who looked familiar. It was his own uncle, his mother's brother, wearing an SS uniform. Klaus dropped the photograph like it burned his hand. He ran outside and vomited in the bushes. Everything he thought he knew about his family was a lie. His uncle had been a monster, and his family must have known. Had his mother known? Had she kept this secret? That evening, the three cooks and the women gathered for what Sarah suggested should be a memorial service. They needed to honor the women who had not survived to see liberation. The women who had died in that compound and were buried in unmarked graves in the forest nearby. They held the service at sunset. Greta sang a hymn in a clear, beautiful voice that made everyone cry. Franz read a prayer. Klaus placed flowers on the graves. Otto prepared a special meal afterward, treating it like the sacred duty it was. Captain Morrison attended the service in full uniform. When it ended, he approached the three cooks. "You men are facing truths that most people run from," he said quietly. "That takes a different kind of courage than fighting on a battlefield. Remember that courage when the nightmares come, because they will come." That night, none of them slept well. The shadows of the past were long and dark, but at least they were no longer hiding from them. July arrived with warm sunshine and the slow realization that life would somehow continue. The women were physically healthy now, though the mental scars would take much longer to heal. They had gained weight, their skin had color again, and some even smiled regularly. It was not the same as being whole, but it was something that in the kitchen, a small miracle was happening. Otto had begun teaching Greta and several other women how to cook professionally. Not just simple meals, but real cooking skills that could help them earn a living after the war. The key to good bread is patience, Otto explained, showing Greta how to knead dough properly. You cannot rush it. You must let it rise in its own time. Greta worked the dough carefully, her movements gaining confidence. "My mother tried to teach me this once, but I was too impatient. I wanted to run outside and play instead. And now," Otto asked gently. "Now I understand that some things are worth waiting for," Greta replied. She looked at Otto with gratitude in her eyes. "You have given me a future," her Otto, "a way to support myself. That is a precious gift." Other women learned different skills. Margaret taught younger women how to organize a kitchen efficiently. Anna, who had been so traumatized, found peace in the repetitive work of chopping vegetables. Ingrid learned to bake pastries, discovering she had a natural talent for delicate work. One afternoon, Captain Morrison came to the kitchen with news. "The women will be moved to a displaced persons camp in 2 weeks," he announced. "There are thousands of people across Europe who lost their homes during the war. The camps will help them find family members and eventually resettle somewhere." The displaced persons camps were temporary communities set up by Allied forces. By mid-1945, there were millions of refugees across Europe. Concentration camp survivors, former prisoners of war, people whose homes had been destroyed, and those who could not or would not return to countries now controlled by the Soviet Union. The DP camps provided food, shelter, and helped reconnecting scattered families. Klaus felt his heart sink. He had grown close to Ingrid. She was his last connection to his hometown and his mother. "Where will they go?" he asked. "That is up to them," Morrison replied. "Some will try to go home. Others will emigrate to America or Britain or Palestine. But that is not all the news." He paused and looked at the three cooks. "I have been authorized to make you three an offer. Instead of sending you to a standard POW camp, you can work at the DP camp as cooks. You would still be prisoners, but you would be doing useful work, helping people who need it." Franz, Otto, and Klaus looked at each other in surprise. It was more than they had dared to hope for. "Why would you do this for us?" Franz asked. Morrison smiled slightly. "Because you have proven that even in the worst circumstances, people can choose to do good. And because we need good cooks at that DP camp more than we need 3 more angry prisoners behind barbed wire." They accepted immediately. The final 2 weeks at the compound were bittersweet. Everyone knew they were leaving, but they had built something special in this unlikely place. Bonds had formed that transcended the labels of enemy and victim, German and prisoner, guard and guarded. Franz spent his time writing letters on behalf of the women. Many were trying to locate family members scattered across war-torn Europe. The International Red Cross was helping reconnect families, but it was slow work. Franz had neat handwriting and patience for the bureaucratic process. He wrote dozens of letters, each one a small hope sent out into an uncertain world. Klaus and Ingrid took long walks around the compound in the evenings. They talked about Hanover, about memories of their hometown before the war destroyed it. Klaus learned that his mother had indeed survived the bombing. Ingrid had received word through the Red Cross. She was alive, living with relatives in the countryside. "You will find her again," Ingrid said with certainty. "This war scattered us like seeds in the wind, but seeds can take root in new soil. Will you go back to Hanover?" Klaus asked. Ingrid shook her head. "There is nothing left there for me. My whole family is gone. I think I will try to go to America. Start completely new." She looked at Klaus. "What about you?" "I will find my mother first," Klaus said. "And then, I do not know. Maybe I will learn to be a real cook instead of just a soldier who happened to work in a kitchen. Otto says I have talent." On the final evening before everyone left, something unexpected happened. The women asked the cooks to sit down while they prepared the meal. The roles were reversed. The cooks became the served. The women had worked together to make a feast with the supplies available. There was roasted chicken, potato salad, fresh bread, and even a simple cake that Greta had baked. It was not fancy food, but it was made with love and gratitude. When everyone was seated, Greta stood up to speak. Her voice was stronger now than it had been 2 months ago. "When we first arrived at this place, we were broken," she began. "We have been treated as less than human for so long that we forgot we were people. We forgot what kindness looked like. We forgot that men could be gentle." She looked at Franz, Otto, and Klaus. "You three were our enemies. You wore the same uniform as the men who hurt us. You spoke the same language. You served the same country. We had every reason to hate you and fear you. But you did something we did not expect. You treated us like human beings. You cooked for us not because you had to, but because you wanted us to heal. You listened to our stories. You stood up for us when we were threatened. You gave us hope when we had none left." Tears rolled down Greta's face, but she smiled through them. "You cannot erase what was done to us. You cannot give us back what we lost. But you showed us that even in the darkest times, there are good people. You showed us that our nationality, our past, our circumstances do not have to define us. Our choices define us. So we thank you, not for being German or being cooks or being prisoners. We thank you for being human when humanity was scarce. We thank you for choosing kindness when cruelty was easier. We thank you for helping us remember who we are." There was not a dry eye in the room. Otto covered his face with his hands and wept openly. Franz wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Klaus simply sat in stunned silence. Captain Morrison, who had been standing quietly in the doorway, stepped forward. "You men came here as prisoners of war," he said. "But you leave here as something more. You leave as proof that redemption is possible. That even in war's darkest corners, light can shine." The next morning, everyone prepared to leave. The women packed their few belongings. The cooks cleaned the kitchen one last time. American trucks waited to take everyone to the DP camp. As they loaded into the trucks, Klaus helped Ingrid with her bag. "What you said last night," he said quietly, "about seeds taking root in new soil. Do you really believe that?" Ingrid smiled. "I have to believe it. Otherwise, what was all this suffering for?" Franz sat in the truck next to Otto. "Do you think we made a difference?" he asked his friend. Otto looked back at the compound they were leaving behind. "We made soup," he said simply. "We baked bread. We listened. We cared. If that is not making a difference, then nothing is." As the trucks rolled away, Greta started singing softly. Other women joined in. It was an old folk song about going home, about new beginnings, about hope. The three cooks listened and felt something they had not felt in years. They felt forgiven. The war had taken everything from all of them. But in losing everything, they had found something unexpected. They had found that the smallest acts of kindness could plant seeds that grew into something beautiful. They had found that redemption was not something you earned, but something you built, one meal, one kind word, one choice at a time. Yes, the trucks carried them toward an uncertain future. They carried something else too. They carried proof that even in humanity's darkest hour, there were people who chose light over darkness, compassion over cruelty, love over hate. And sometimes that choice was enough.